Do you want this? Will this move us forward toward our path of ultimately creating self-sufficient family units? Is this equitable in its distribution? Is this something that we feel like we can accomplish? And then I think secondarily is we have to figure out what success is. We have to define success. I think sometimes we haven't, in the nonprofits broadly, haven't done a great job of saying this is exactly what we're trying to do. We have these big theoretical statements. I'm going to end generational poverty. I'm not going to do that. I wish I could, but I'm not naive or narcissistic enough to think that I'm that guy that at the end of the day, people are going to be like, yep, he figured it out.
And honest, that's a good response out of a leader. I think that's a good indication of a good leader, because people always want to have the answer and want to be able to lay out a path about how to get there. And sometimes the answer is, I don't know.
Look, at that level, I don't look, if we could have figured it out, and it was that simple, someone would have done it. Right. I'm not the smartest guy to sit in this chair. I'm not the smartest guy to have done this job. Someone before me would have solved it if it was solvable like that. I don't believe it is. I believe that what I can do in my small corner of the world is control a piece of what is a much larger puzzle. Right. So for me and for us, defining success is progress along the continuum to self-sufficiency for families. Right. And we have to decide how we can do that, right? And we need to get the depth right. I don't want to be in one of those spaces where we talk in a year and I'm like, we've touched 1,000 families. And you're like, what'd you do? And I'm like, we read some books and that was really about it. There's no depth, right? My theory of change is depth, not breadth. So I need to figure out what those steps look like and then be able to say, look, here's the reality of the situation, right? It's 10 families, it's 15, right? The number's not as big as we think it is because the depth required is massive. And then I have to be really intelligent, like you said, to say, okay, what else in the constellation of need do I need to plug into, right? Housing, workforce development, food insecurity, childcare, right? There's all of these things that are happening for different people at different times and with different levels of veracity. I need to be able and be humble enough to say, okay, look, my thing is still important, but it's not the most important thing to this family right now. So how do we sort of hub and spoke that model of like, you know, as the place-based nonprofit, sure, we do our thing and we do it well. And we're really focused on education. We're really focused on youth empowerment and full family engagement. And that's 3 of 50 things that we got to get right, you know? And so we need to be able to say, okay, if we can do that well, I'm proud of that, but it's not going to solve the problem, right? We need to plug into these other things and then by our powers combined over the course of 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, we're looking for progress. And then if we start to, if we start to see momentum, we know we're on the right track, right? But, you know, having this sort of fallacy of yeah, we're going to do it and we're going to fix it is ludicrous, and it just sets us up for failure, right? Because people are going to come back in 2 years being like, why didn't you fix the poverty rate, right? And I'm like, well, I moved in 10 years, so like whatever we're doing isn't working, and we just have to be a little more intelligent and humble about how we move along that path.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a tall task too, there, my man.
It is. I mean, look, it's sort of, you know,
the man for the job.
I think, you know, I was talking about this the other day. Is I think we have to be very careful. Is there is a certain amount of sort of arrogance that comes with doing a job that's this big and not losing yourself in the fact that it feels so big. And I think for me, it's about, can you just create chunks? It's like, how do you eat an elephant? You know, it's like one bite at a time, you know? So we have to be smart about what we're able to do and do it really, really well. And try and keep focused on, you know, Sam Sanders was talking about this. Cause I asked him, I was like, dude, how do you decide in any given day, like what to do? Right. And he was like, look, you gotta be very clear about what the most pressing issue is and where you can have the most positive impact. And so that's what we're trying to think of too, is like inside of what we do and what we're set up to do well, what can we do right at a really, really high level? And then where can we have the most positive impact? And that's where resources go. And then we could say, look, Charlottesville, you got resources coming out of every orifice. Like, let's figure out how to help continue to put these things together, right? And create a little more of a cohesive ecosystem so it doesn't feel so fragmented, so it doesn't feel so difficult to navigate, so it doesn't feel like people are getting lost, right? I mean, the resources are there. I think the intellect's there. I think it becomes a little bit of a posture of nonprofits to say, look, we need to get in this, you know, we need to row this boat together and figure out how all these pieces, you know, work in cohesion to head where I think ultimately we're all trying to go.
Do you feel like the resources are readily available?
It depends on who you are and who you know.
Well, see, you know what? But I think you should make a distinction between available and accessible.
Okay.
Because I personally think that they are definitely available.
I agree with you. You know, here's what I will say. I think that nonprofits spend so much time justifying their existence that sometimes that gets lost in the actual doing of the work. So, for example, if we head down, focus all our energy on doing great work, nobody hears about it. And people say, well, you got to tell a better story. We say, all right, bet. We focus all this energy on telling a better story. They're like, well, that's inauthentic. You should be working harder. And we're going like, all right, well, where do we find the happy medium between doing the right thing and this incentive, which is to make sure everyone knows we're doing the right thing. Because if we disincentivize that, we can't do any more of the right thing. We get caught in this kind of circular argument. And so again, what we're constantly trying to figure out and strength test and understand is like, how do we do that in a way that's agentic to the people for whom we profess to work, right? How do we do it in a way that doesn't feel like I'm co-opting your story, right, to make myself seem smart, right? And what I'm really trying to do is invite you in to say, I want you to tell the story, because ultimately, if we're able to do this together, we can do more of it and do it better. And some of that's trust, right? Some of that is really, you know, I mean, we talk a lot about sort of the community and the donor facing side. We gotta earn the trust of the community, and trust is hard to get and easy to lose. And we have to be very clear about sort of how we walk and how we talk and how we act and how we invite people into places and spaces. And a lot of what we're trying to do is be very intentional about that, of you know, who sits on our board and who tells stories and who we, you know, connect to opportunities and things of this nature. I feel the nonprofit world occasionally has accidentally wrestled some agency away from the people, because that's what we're incentivized to do. We're incentivized to say, look at all the problems we're solving, right? Because that's how we get money, and that's how we, right? And what we're trying to do is challenge that paradigm a little bit, to say, look, there's a way to do the work and also be very genuine about it. And it doesn't, you know, we're not going to please everyone all the time, right? But we have to understand that, you know, without the trust of the community, none of this gets done, right? And without the community being able to look at us, the 9 of us, and all of, but you know, to come to our shop and really understand, we have to have a hard conversation that I'm doing it because I have your back, and we can work through it like that. If that doesn't exist, it's not, we got nothing. It's not going to work. You know.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are speaking with Price Thomas, Executive Director of City of Promise. And you know, Price, like, that makes me want to freestyle. I don't know if you realize that your name rhymes with the name of the organization. You know, Price
That's
Thomas,
right.
City of Promise.
I know.
Come on, Max, where you at? Spit a hot 16 for me.
I know. What happens when you when friends with an MC?
Yeah, well, everything just comes in. Right? What is that? I dream in lyric, end in rhyme. Was that the J. Ivy and the Kanye song? Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Hey, so and you know, to bring everybody up to speed too, for those that don't know, I wanted to read this blurb from their website. It says, at City of Promise, we are committed to a family-centered approach of educational support. First, we honor parents as the experts and most important educators of their children. We respect them as the key decision makers for their children's success. Second, are foster strong relationships with families to build the trust and accountability necessary for student achievement. On a typical day, we are coaching parents on Page Street, coaching students at schools, and collaborating with partners to host dual generation programs and traditional after school activities. So, man, that is definitely noble. The direction I wanted to take it is like to get to how we support and like how you really get your work done, because I don't know if you recall, but I was with you and Ravi back when you were at United Way, and like I was on your podcast, and you and I ended up having a discussion within that interview about the connection, about like when you maybe have access to resources, or you may have connections, like whatever those resources may be. It doesn't have to be monetary, right? Like it could be like networking, you know, career-based things or what have you. But the acceptance piece, because we're dealing with, you know, with community that gets quite jaded sometimes, like when it comes to seeing organizations come in or folks come in and then they may be there for a little bit, then they're gone, or not getting sort of what's promised. As Max said, City of Promise, like even the name is kind of strong.
Sure.
So I'm curious, like tell us about some of the hurdles that you may have already witnessed, or like some of the tactics that you employ, like when it comes to actually building that trust and getting buy-in for new leadership.
Yeah. There is a
too soon to be talking about new leadership.
I you know, there is something to proximity, and I know this is what this built on. I know Brian Stevenson said it, but there's something about that, about saying, look, I'm here. I'm here, you know, and I'm going to be there, and I'm easy to find, I'm easy to reach. You know, willing to talk, to chat, to hear it, to take it, to absorb it. I think part of it is not coming in with an arrogance that I have all the answers, right? That I've got to learn really what happens day to day and listen to, and that's adults and children, right? Absolutely. I mean, I think that we have to pay homage to the fact that a lot of these young people have unique and you know, very sort of impactful experiences that they need to be able to speak on, and that is going to shape them and their entire worldview. And so what we really want to do is give them an opportunity to feel like they're heard, and to feel like, you know, we take those into account too. And this full family modality is important because exactly what it says. And I think what people understand is that your parents or caretakers, whoever is in your family unit, are the most impactful people in your life. Right. And for me, it was lucky enough to be, you know, mom and dad, and I had aunts and uncles who were nearby. And so whoever is in that close circle is going to be able to pull all of those levers. And so, you know, I think sometimes when we look at how we parse out these issues, we say, okay, well, what are the schools doing? And the schools are trying their best. But if we're working with the kid from 8 to 3, what happens from 3 to 7:45? Right. So if we're taking one step forward and one step back, we can't make progress like that.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that I approach it, and I think I have to, with the idea that all caretakers, you know, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, older brother, cousin, whoever, want the best for these young people, right? They're trying their best. You know, and that doesn't mean that they're doing it right all the time, but they want it to go well, right? And so what we have to do, if we approach it like that, we say, okay, that's fair. And now how do we make it better? And where can we plug in, right? With sort of a posture of honesty, but also empathy, to say, look, here's what we're going to hold you accountable to, but here's what we can support. And I think what we don't want to do is overshoot our support metric and say, we'll just try and fix it, right? Because ultimately that doesn't help you do anything for yourself, right? My theory of change is, you know, kind of, I'm here for a good time, not a long time, right? Like, I don't want you in my program. Look, I hear people tell these stories all the time. Like, I've been with so-and-so organization since I was 5. I'm like, why? Right? Like, what? Like, for what? Right? Like, we are trying to get you out. Like, I want you to be able to do all of these things for yourself, right? I want you and your family unit to be able to do these things for yourself.
That's a dangerous conversation,
right?
You know,
100%. It is. It absolutely is.
What
right?
you mean? You want me out?
Well, that's what I'm saying. But I want to equip you with the tools to not need me. You know, and so.
But it's
no, go.
It's an odd thought process, because there are a lot of people who would get up in arms about the idea of the goal being for you to not be reliant upon X, Y, or Z resources, because, you know, there's a variety of reasons, but, you know, there's nothing, they don't have anything to help sustain them if they leave this program or do this or do that. And there are people here to get upset with that idea.
So my best analogy is physical therapy. So my previous world was sports. And so my thinking is that I've had surgeries, I've done a lot of physical therapy. The physical therapist's goal is to get me back onto the field. Now, if I roll that ankle again, I'm going to come back. But the goal is not for me to keep taking ice baths and doing stretches for the next 6 weeks. Is to get back to training and get back to the game. Right. And so the way I think about this is that, you know, trying to be, again, understand that these issues are immensely complex and intersectional, and they rotate and revolve and change. Right. But is there a way to say that we're gonna look to make progress every year, and then there's a line, and that off you go. And we're not going in. Look, again, I'm not naive enough to think that there will be, you know, where you hear people say, my job's to put myself out of a job. Like, okay, fair enough. And that's a good soundbite, right? But ultimately it's to, can we create opportunities for families to say, yeah, I got this. Right. And then if you don't got it, or something happens, fair. But everything that we do is going to be geared towards that ultimate goal of being like, you got it for yourself. Right. And this is why I talk about, when I say, it might be that our thing in as it pertains to you is the third most important thing. We might have to help you connect to workforce development, or you need to attain a skill, or pay a fine, or whatever it is. And we can be responsive to that. But is everything that we're doing, are we having that conversation about, okay, how does this further push you further on the continuum towards what we're considering self-sufficiency, right? And does this give you the tools you need to sustain that, barring you know, barring something unforeseen.
Right.
And so what we want to do is make sure that we're putting people on that path, not creating circles of codependency where it's like, why are you coming back every month? And we keep doing the same thing every month. We're not having the right conversation, right? We're not digging far enough to say, okay, what really is causing this level of recidivism? And again, I say this because I think incentive wise, we're like, look, we're helping. Okay, sort of, right? But ultimately isn't, I mean, I think this sort of level of self-actualization is what we all aspire to, you know, like I want you to be able to do it for yourself and make those decisions for yourself. And I think from what, you know, we know and what we've seen and people we talk to, most people are like, yeah, I want to whatever my dreams are, right? Get a new house, get a new car, send my kid to college, take a cruise. I don't care. That's entirely up to you, whatever those goals are. And I want you to be able to achieve those absent of my intervention, right? And we will be there as a support system, and we'll move and change as community needs change. But I don't want to get stuck in this thing where our help, right, becomes just creating another hamster wheel of people who need to come back, right? If you come to us, fine. You know what I'm saying? But I want you to, you know, have the opportunity to really experience that level of fulfillment. And our goal is to, again, in everything that we do, be very analytical about, like, okay, is this a Band-Aid thing, which we got to solve short-term needs 100%. But underneath that, are we creating the right, you know, sort of up into the right direction for these families?
You know, and I guess just to carry on that conversation, a lot of people argue that there's some institutional barriers that we cannot get around. So
yeah, well, and sure, absolutely, and there, I mean, look, there's like policy change. There's just sort of, I mean, we can talk about kind of the entire structure of capitalism itself, right? And again, I'm not, you know, this is not Price sitting here like saying he's going to change the world, but what sure if I do nothing else, what I want to do is at least shift the way we think about it, and try and push our people and our communities to think bigger about the art of the possible, right? And I want that to hopefully create some momentum for someone smarter than me to figure out the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts, right? To say, oh, we might be onto something. Let's put it into practice, right? Or at least catalyze enough people that now we can create a consortium of people that are like, oh yeah, maybe we can sort of shift the incentives of some of these nonprofits into creating programs that do X, Y, Z, right? And so, you know, I think that there are like massive, you know, kind of, you know, tectonic level things that need to change to create that scale of change for, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. What I'm proposing is like, let me start with 10, you know, and then let's make that 10, 20, and let's work from there, right? You know, I have no, you know, I'm not under the delusion that like we're going to pop out and be like, well, we did it, we fixed it, right? But what I think we can do, if we're smart about it, is prove that it can work. And then what we have to do, as we were talking about, from access and availability of resources, say, look, this is what it costs to do a minute piece of it. So this is how far off the mark we are from an investment standpoint. And so realistically, now we have to figure out how to get those resources in the right hands to the right people, and then create, like you said, the right apparatus by which it sort of levels up to what we're looking for and what we're talking about. And that, again, requires, you know, me and Sam Sanders and it, you know, there's all of hundreds of people that to do that, to have to be on the same page and have to be mission aligned and incentive aligned to do that right and to do that well. You know, I don't know how cynical I am and that and whether or not that's possible, you know, but I think that it's worth testing, and it's worth trying, and it's worth sort of barking up that tree until we get a really good indication that you know, we need to pivot and try something new.
I think we should take a break here in just a minute, Max. What you think? You know, we can come back and we can talk about, you know, the actual programs and your goals. You know, I think that was a great introduction. Great introduction, you know, in regards to people knowing where you're coming from and, you know, and your duties and responsibilities. So we can, you know, talk about, you know, the actual programs and whatnot. So yeah. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. So IMHO family, stay tuned and tell a friend. We will be right back with none other than City of Promise Executive Director Price Thomas.